You ever wonder why things that seem rock solid just suddenly fall apart? Like a thriving forest that's here one day and gone the next, or a huge industry that just collapses overnight. Well, it turns out our whole idea of what it means to be stable might be, well, kind of wrong. It seems we're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. So let's dive into this paradox.
I mean, we see this kind of thing all of the time, right? A business that looks like a perfect model of efficiency suddenly can't handle one tiny disruption, or a forest that seems perfectly healthy for a century gets wiped out by a single pest. This is not just bad luck, folks. There's a really deep, underlying principle at work here, and it makes you ask, what even is stability?
So to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at how nature itself handles change. See, ecologists have realized there isn't just one kind of resilience. No, there are actually two, and they couldn't be more different. And trust me, understanding this difference is the key to, well, pretty much everything that follows.
Okay, check this out. On one side, you've got what we call engineering resilience. This is probably what you think of when you hear the word. How fast can something bounce back to normal? It's all about efficiency, control, getting back to the way things were. But then, on the other side, there's ecosystem resilience. And this is a totally different beast. This one asks a different question. How big of a punch can this system take before it's forced to flip into something totally new? It's not about bouncing back. It's about persistence, adaptation, and even embracing change.
And that right there is the danger. When we focus only on efficiency and control, that engineering resilience, we can accidentally make the whole system incredibly fragile. By trying to eliminate every little wobble, every bit of variability, we actually strip away its ability to handle real surprises. The system becomes brittle, ready to shatter at the first shock it wasn't designed for.
Okay, so if nature isn't just focused on bouncing back, what's its secret? Well, it follows this amazing blueprint for renewal, a cycle that actually depends on things breaking down. It's this idea of creative destruction. Let's take a look at how this whole thing works.
Yeah, this whole idea comes from an ecologist named C.S. Halling. He was the one who figured out that ecosystems don't just, grow and then stay stable forever. Instead, they move through this continuous loop, this cycle of change that he called the adaptive cycle. All right, let's break this cycle down. It starts with the exploitation phase. Think of weeds and fast-growing plants taking over an empty field. It's all about rapid growth. Next up is conservation. This is where things slow down. Big trees grow, resources get locked up, and you get this stable, mature forest. But, and this is the key, that stability makes it rigid. Sooner or later, something happens, the release phase. This is the creative destruction part, like a forest fire or a pest. The whole system breaks down. And that leads to the final phase, reorganization. Nutrients are freed up, new things can grow, there's a ton of innovation, and the whole system gets ready for a new cycle. It's this constant loop of growth, collapse, and renewal.
And this is where the paradox just smacks you in the face. If that mature forest becomes too good at being stable, if it gets too resilient to resisting small changes, it actually prevents the fire, that moment of creative destruction it needs for long-term renewal. It gets so locked in, so stable, that it can't adapt. And that just sets it up for a much, much bigger collapse down the road.
Okay, so forests and fires, that's all pretty fascinating. But you might be wondering, what on earth does this have to do with the modern world of business and supply chains? Well, as it turns out, pretty much everything. This ecological model is an almost perfect way to understand why some companies thrive and others completely fall apart when things get messy.
So let's nail down what we're talking about here. Look at this definition of supply chain resilience. See how it has both of those ideas we just discussed baked right into it? It's the ability to either return to its original state, that's your engineering resilience, or to move to a new, better state after a disruption. And that second part? That's pure ecosystem resilience at work.
And this isn't just some nice theory either. Let's actually dig into some incredible research from the Thai food industry that put these ideas to the test with real-world data. This shows us exactly how this all plays out in the real world.
So this model really lays it all out for us. Basically, on one side, you have the things that make a company fragile. They call them supply chain vulnerabilities, or SCV. On the other side are the things that make it strong, its capabilities, or SCC. And both of those feed into the company's overall resilience, SCR, which, and this is the goal, drives its competitive advantage, or CA. So what are these vulnerabilities we're talking about? Well, the research points to exactly the kind of stuff you'd expect. A chaotic market, intense pressure from your competitors, not having enough resources. All the external forces that can make a business feel shaky and exposed.
Then, on the flip side, you've got your capabilities. These are your strengths, your superpowers. We're talking about things like being flexible, being efficient, working really well with your partners, and of course having solid financial strength. These are the tools in your toolbox that let you handle those disruptions.
All right, now let's get to the numbers because this is where it gets really powerful. So, the study found that vulnerabilities have a big negative impact on both your capabilities and your resilience. I mean, no surprise there, right? The more vulnerable you are, the weaker you get. But look at the other side. Building up your capabilities has a strong positive effect on your resilience, a plus 0.68. That's huge. But the real headline, the number that should make everyone sit up and pay attention, is that last one, a positive 0.96. I mean, wow, that is an incredibly strong connection. Let me put it this way. What this data is telling us, loud and clear, is that being resilient isn't just about playing defense and surviving. It's one of the single most powerful offensive weapons you have for driving success and getting ahead of your competition.
So let's tie all of this together. What's the big takeaway here? How do we connect that story about the forest fire to what happens on a factory floor? It really all comes down to redefining what we think of as strength. It really boils down to three simple things. First, vulnerabilities are a double whammy. They don't just expose you to risk, they actively tear down your existing strengths. Second, the absolute best way to build resilience is to invest in your capabilities, your flexibility, your relationships, your agility. And third, the payoff for doing that is massive. That stronger resilience directly translates into a huge competitive advantage. It's what lets you win. And at the end of the day, it all comes back to that blueprint from nature. The strongest businesses, just like the most enduring ecosystems, are not the ones that never, ever fall down. Not at all. They're the ones that get it. They understand that those moments of collapse and reorganization aren't failures. No, they're critical opportunities to innovate, to renew, and to come back stronger. That's what true strength is. It's the ability to adapt and evolve. So that really leaves us with one last question to think about. When you look at the important systems in your own life, your career, your business, maybe even your community, what are you building for? Are you building for that rigid, efficient stability? Or are you building for adaptive resilience? Put another way, are you ready for the fire?